All right. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to Impact 100 Jersey Coast applicant information session. Firstly, thank you so much for joining us today. We know you're all incredibly busy and we really are excited to see some familiar faces back. Thank you for looking and considering renewing, and really excited to see some new faces too. And thank you for your interest in our grant opportunity. I did want to give a shout out and very big thank you and welcome as well to Jeannie Wagner, from the Director of Development from Parker Family Health Center, and Beatrice Esterfeld, Executive Director of Community Affairs and Resource Center. They are two of our 2021 grantees and very kindly given up their time to be with us today to speak to their experience at Impact and to answer your questions. So thank you both so much. So a little bit of housekeeping before we start. If we go back to that first slide, just to note that this is actually a new email that we have for our grants team. So if you could just take careful note of that. Our website, if you haven't been to it, is full of really detailed, good information, including FAQs. And in that information packet with the FAQs, there is a link to our application and our budget template. Currently, they are 2021, but that's going to be updated very shortly. We're just in the throes of finalizing the 2022 version. But we don't actually go through our application today in detail, but we do make it available for you all and try to be as transparent with that as possible. So just wanted you to know, please go to our website for FAQs and those links to those two documents. Today's session's going to be recorded, as Anne said, and it's going to be on our How to Apply page on our website. So we highly recommend you use this as a reference. It's deliberately thorough so that you would literally have a walkthrough of all of the steps and all of the instructions for our entire application process start to finish. So we really hope it sets you up for success for the year ahead. Please, during the session, if you could put any questions into the chat, and I'm going to keep monitoring that, and then we're going to revisit those questions at the end, and I'll sort of direct them to the relevant speaker to answer. And when we come to the Q&A at the end, by all means, use your little raise hand symbol, or you can put it in the chat if that's better for you, whichever you prefer. I, by the way, am Ro Crawford-Phillips. I didn't even introduce myself. I'm so sorry. I'm co-president of Impact 100 Jersey Coast. And for those of you familiar with Impact, you may have been aware of the recent changes in our leadership. Our fantastic founder, Deirdre Spiropoulos, moved off to a full-time job in January. And so I stepped up from the role of grants chair into that position. And you'll be hearing from the new grants chair, Anne Ye, later in the presentation. So delighted to see you all. And again, thank you for joining us. So on to the next slide. Who are we and what do we do? I know that many of you are familiar with Impact, but here is a slide which gives you a high-level description of who we are and our goals. We are a women's grant-making collaborative, which means that each member pays an annual fee, and we pool those funds to provide high-impact three-figure grants to local nonprofits in Monmouth County, serving Monmouth County. A little bit about our history. Impact 100 Jersey Coast was born in 2015, thanks to Deirdre, as I mentioned, and Heather Burke, our founders and former co-presidents. And what many people don't know is that Impact is actually a global movement. So it was started 2001 in Cincinnati and now spans multiple continents and around 60 chapters to date, providing more than $55 million in grants to nonprofits. We have 3 other impacts in New Jersey, so a shout out to all of you. We have Impact 100 Garden State, Impact 100 Essex, and Impact 100 Jersey, South Jersey, each serving different New Jersey counties. So Impact is all about the power of collective giving. So it's the power of one multiplied by many. And the more members we have, the more grant funding we can award and the more lives we can impact. Our goal is to be as inclusive as possible and have as diverse a membership as possible. Therefore, we'd have as many voices and perspectives throughout our organization, particularly on our grant review committees, making decisions about where our funding is going to go. And we really just want to represent as far as possible the communities that we serve. So this next slide, thank you, Anne, is a very high level, step-by-step kind of a reference slide, if you like, of how it works. We welcome members throughout the year, and each pays $1,100 membership fee. $1,000 goes towards our grant fund and $100 goes to our operating fund, so that we can sustain our organization for the future. And what's really important is that 100% of that 1,000 donation goes to our grant fund for the funding for the nonprofits. So how do we collectively decide what projects to fund? About 25% of our membership each year serves on 5 different focus area committees, and they will evaluate the applications, they will conduct site visits, and then they put forward finalists for the entire membership to vote on as to where that grant funding will go. So that's just a very high level overview for you. More of that later in the presentation. The point is, we're all about transformational grant making. We're all about high impact and really a game-changing amount that will really move the needle for our nonprofits. We know that they often write, you all often write grants for 50, 100, and you might get 5, 10, 15,000. So we really hope that with these grants, you'll be able to dream big and have a huge impact in the community. So exciting is that our membership just closed literally within the last day or two. So we're busy tallying up our number for 2022. The amount will be announced on April 1st, and we do have a deeper dive Q&A session on the 7th of April. So we really welcome you back for that more interactive session where we can delve a little bit more into some topics and we can have discussion about anything that you would like to ask us more about. So please do have that on your radar, and we welcome to see, we would love to see you back on that for that session. The next slide, as you've already seen, because thank you, Anne, it's just to say we're so proud to have given over $2 million to date to these incredible organizations, funding 18 projects in total to date. We continue to welcome applications from a broad range of nonprofits. We fund different programs, different types of program. It may be a capital program, it may be a human service delivery program, and also we welcome nonprofits of different sizes. You may be established or you may be new, and you can apply in different ways, either as an individual or as a collaboration, but more on that later. And last but not least, I'm really proud to introduce our team. This is our grants team. Everybody on here is going to be part of the process between now and the end of the year. And I'm so excited to, as I mentioned, hand over the reins of Grants Chair to Tricia Frankenfeld and Anne Ye. And Anne Ye is with us today and will be presenting shortly. Mary Riley is our Vice Chair of Grants. Betsy McKnight and Elizabeth Williams, our Nonprofit Coordinator Co-Chairs, are both speaking today. Holly Dietz and Marianne Donahue, our Focus Area Committee Co-Chairs, will really oversee all of our review process. Liz Mcneill will be speaking today. She is our Finance Review Committee Chair. And there's Mary again. Mary's also our Grantee Relations Chair. So you'll be hearing from a number of them today, and it is my absolute pleasure to now hand you over and introduce Anne Ye, our Grants Co-Chair. So over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Ro. Welcome, everyone. My name is Anne Ye, and together with Tricia Frankenfield, we are this year's Grant Co-Chairs. I'm so honored to lead this process and work with some wonderful women and learn about the nonprofits you are a part of and the difference each of you is making in Monmouth County. So here is a high-level overview of our grants process. We'll break each step down shortly, but essentially nonprofits apply, applications are reviewed by our member-led grant review committees, And finally, our entire membership votes to decide our grant recipients at our annual meeting held in November. So what's new for 2022? We recently made changes to our grant distribution. We will still be giving away impact grants in the amount of $100,000 for every 100 members. But based on our membership, which will be announced April 1st, as Rose said, we will be distributing the remaining funds as mission awards. We wanted to acknowledge the hard work it takes for nonprofits to get to a finalist spot and support their mission in some way. The mission award money can be used as seed funding for the proposed project or be used as general support of the finalist mission. It's totally up to the organization, and there's no formal reporting requirements for the mission award. Also, recipients can reapply the following year. At the same time, we're increasing the number of finalists at our annual meeting from 5 in the past to up to 10. We're asking grant review committees to nominate up to 2 applications so that each member can have more exposure to local nonprofits and consider more projects at the annual meeting. So what does that look like? Like I mentioned, we are giving the ability for our grant review committees to put forward up to 2 finalists for a potential of 10 presentations. We won't know the actual amount of each mission award until we know the number of finalists in October. But regardless of the number of finalists, each mission award for this year will be capped at $10,000, given it's a new approach for us and it's unrestricted funding. Any funds over and above $10,000 per mission award is added to the $100,000 impact grant equally. So let's use last year's membership number of 430 members. The total grant funds would be $430,000. So we'd give 4 $100,000 impact grants, and the remaining $30,000 would be distributed as mission awards. Let me illustrate it with 2 different scenarios. First, we end up with 6 finalists, so there would only be 2 mission award recipients and 4 Impact 100 recipients. They would each receive $10,000 each, not $15,000 because we capped it at 10, and the remaining $10,000 reverts back to the impact grant. So that would be divided among the nonprofits, and that would increase their impact grant from $100,000 to $102,500 for this example. So another scenario this could play out is, say we end up with 9 finalists. There would be 4 recipients of the Impact 100 grant, and then the remaining 5 nonprofits would split the mission award funds of $30,000. So each mission award in this case would be $6,000. If you have any further questions, please put them in the chat. We know it's a little bit of, we have to wait until we know our total, and then of course how many finalists we have, but we will be definitely having a number that we know will go towards mission awards on April 7th Q&A session. So definitely come back then. And lastly, I just like to point out we've added 2 questions under the organization profile of the application in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We as an organization are on our own DEI journey to evolve our selection process and to ensure the reach and impact of our grants are as inclusive as possible. We have included these questions to educate ourselves and our members on where you are in your journey, wherever that may be, and discover how it's going. Your responses, which have no bearing on your score or success in receiving a grant, will help us understand what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to the landscape of Monmouth County nonprofits today. Past applicants know that we have always been committed to diversity through our grant funding priority of funding projects that provide aid to underserved populations in Monmouth County. So here is the nonprofit application process. There are 4 steps, and for those of you returning this year, they're the same 4 as in previous years. Just use this as a reference slide on how our process works. We'll be going in depth on each step in this presentation, and we will post these slides and the recording to our website, as I mentioned. Step 1 is to submit the online eligibility form. This is our version of a letter of intent or inquiry. This will go live on our website on April 4th, following our grant funding membership announcement on April 1st. It's a straight yes or no questionnaire and to ensure the eligibility before you submit your application. The eligibility forms must be submitted online by May 13th. Step 2 is to complete and submit the online application, which will be June 1st, and you will receive the application once you submit the eligibility form. Step 3 takes place after the first round of application reviews. The selected organizations in each focus area will be asked to host a site visit for committee members. And the last step is when 2 finalists from each focus area will present their projects to our membership at the annual meeting, where members vote and grant recipients are announced. And we are so excited to give more exposure to nonprofits this year. So we have 5 focus areas which applicants can apply into. Each area is deliberately broad, and it's up to you which area you submit your application into. Our suggestion is to think about the focus area where your project falls under, not necessarily your organization. You select the focus area you're applying into on your eligibility form, and you cannot change it later in the application process. Please visit our website for further definitions of each area, and if you still have questions on our focus area, reach out to us via our email that we gave earlier. So to match each focus area, there's a focus area committee, or a FAC, we like to call them, made up of impact members. We recognize that agencies that apply for grants entrust us with considerable information in your application. We must continue to earn your trust by ensuring we safeguard it. Focus area committee members keep all applicant information as well as meeting discussions confidential. We also have a conflict of interest policy to ensure there are no FAC members serving on a committee that may prevent them from being totally unbiased, objective, and fair in their evaluations. For instance, we allow and welcome nonprofit leaders and staff to serve on committees. However, if someone is a director at an arts organization that's applying, they are not permitted to serve on the Arts and Culture Committee. Or if your mother is serving on the board of a health organization that's applying, they're not permitted to serve on a Health and Wellness Committee. This is why we ask you to select your focus area at the time of eligibility, because we're placing members in areas where there will not be conflicts, and changing it at the time of application will throw our distribution of members off. So at this time, I would like to introduce Elizabeth Williams, our nonprofit coordinator co-chair, to speak about our eligibility and our application. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Anne. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you and to go over the details of the grant application process. I'm a newcomer to the grants team. However, I've been an impact member for several years, and I've enjoyed learning so much about the projects that we've previously funded. Now let's go on to this year's application and eligibility information. Impact 100 fully recognizes the time and resources that go into submitting a grant application. So the first step in our process is to determine if the submitting organization is actually eligible to participate. These next slides outline our organization eligibility requirements, which is different from project eligibility, which we will discuss a little bit later. For all repeating applicants, this information has not changed. All the criteria reflect the mission and funding priorities of Impact, which are to support local organizations serving local residents in Monmouth County, to meet our responsibility to our membership by ensuring that organizations that participate in our process are financially secure and stable and have the infrastructure and resources to manage a grant of this size. So let's go over this eligibility criteria. The eligible organization needs to be tax exempt under the 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. It needs to be serving Monmouth County, New Jersey. The aim of the Impact Grant is to support local organizations serving local residents. An organization's headquarters can be located outside of Monmouth County, but the proposed project must be located in and benefit Monmouth County. The organization needs to have been operating as a registered 501c3 organization for at least 36 months prior to applying. And this is evidenced with your letter of determination, your date of exemption from the IRS. The organization will possess 2 years of financial statements, of complete financial statements, and Liz will go over the financial requirements in more detail later in this presentation. And the organization must have a minimum annual operating budget of $100,000, both in gross revenue and expenses. So it's worth noting that there are some other impact groups which have a higher minimum budget, such as $3 million or $5 million. But our requirements are lower to ensure our grant process is accessible to as many Monmouth County nonprofits as possible, while also providing our members with the reassurance that a potential grantee organization is already experienced in handling a six-figure budget. However, we have also had feedback that even the minimum budget is not a reality for some organizations, particularly ones that are volunteer-based. So next slide, please. Even if your organization doesn't meet the minimum operating budget criteria, we recognize that you may still be perfectly placed to deliver a really transformative high-impact project. If you're in that situation, Impact welcomes you to apply as a collaboration with another nonprofit that does have the budget. This slide explains the requirements of the collaboration. But in essence, there is a lead organization that submits the application and has fiscal responsibility for management of the funds. Then the non-lead organization, or organizations if there's more than one, submits a letter of commitment as part of the application, which explains its part in the proposed project as part of that. And importantly, the non-lead organization can be exempt from two requirements. It does not have to have a minimum annual budget of $100,000, and it does not have to have been in existence as a 501c3 nonprofit for 3 years prior to applying. These additional points allow for startups to apply. Note the last bullet on this slide. A collaboration should not be confused with a contributing partnership. Next slide, please. The collaboration, if we go over this one more time, as the previous slide said, a collaboration should not be confused with a contributing partnership. It all comes down to who will be receiving the impact grant funds. In a collaboration, the participants share the grant funding. So, for example, the lead organization may take, say, 50% of the funds and then pass the remaining 50% to the non-lead organization to administer for its part of the project. The lead organization details in their application and on the budget form the amount that will be passed through to the non-lead. The collaborating non-lead partner provides a letter of commitment confirming how much of the grant they will receive and how they will use it. So a collaboration is where the non-lead and lead share the grant funds. And if you don't share the funds, you are a partnership. So the partnership, there's no direct pass-through of impact funds to both organizations. There's just one applying organization that receives and manages the funds. Of course, there are all different types of partnerships. A financial one where the applying organization may use impact funds to pay another organization. That could be a for-profit or nonprofit. For example, to pay rent for space or for a company to provide transportation. But that would simply be part of their expenses and it would be laid out in their project budget. The applying organization, they might partner with an organization in a non-financial way. For example, they may offer their program to one or more partner organizations that already serve the audience that they are wanting to serve. So let's say, for example, the lead organization may want to offer a free employment program to at-risk youth. So they partner with organizations serving at-risk youth, and they are the participants for the program or project that the impact grant would fund. But in a partnership, there is no sharing of the impact funds like there is in a collaboration, whereby the lead organization passes through some of the impact grant funds to the non-lead. Next slide, please. Great. Now let's look at what we fund. These are the requirements for the proposed project or programs, the project eligibility. The project needs to serve and benefit Monmouth County. Just so you're aware, as Ro mentioned earlier, there are, in fact, 3 other impact groups serving New Jersey: Impact Garden State, Impact 100 Essex, and Impact 100 South Jersey, all serving different counties. So it's a great question if you're thinking today, If I'm an organization that applied for an Impact 100 grant state funding, can I still apply for an Impact 100 Jersey Coast if it's a different project in a different area? And the answer is yes. As long as your project serves Monmouth County population, we would welcome your application for funding. The next point is about the types of projects we fund. Traditionally and pre-COVID, our focus was to fund new or expanded projects. And this year, again, we will also consider proposals that strengthen or sustain an existing project or collaboration. So while our focus is still to fund transformative projects and programs, we totally understand that transformative may look very different to you given all the current challenges your organizations have been through and currently face today. We just ask that you clearly define the measurable impact that the impact grant would have for your organization and those that you serve within your application. The project needs to have a project budget that is equal or greater than the grant amount. So submissions for less than the grant amount will not be considered. You need to fully spend the grant funds within 24 months. However, we encourage requests to fund ongoing programs. It's great to know that we are jumpstarting or investing in a program that has a strong probability of being funded beyond our 1 or 2 year involvement. We just ask that you provide a clear explanation of how a program can be sustained after the grant has been spent. Next, please. So this seems like a long list. So in the interest of time, we won't go over all of them, but these are the projects or programs that Impact does not provide funding for. All of these are standard, and we can take specific questions at the end if there's one. Just a couple of important points to highlight. Operating expenses and overhead. We of course recognize that overhead costs and expenses are required for the successful management and delivery of a project or program. So these types of expenses will be accepted as long as they are both reasonable and they are identified as being an integral part of and necessary for the program or the project. In terms of programming expenses, we understand that being properly staffed is critical to implementing any project. If staff expenses are a large part of the project budget, please explain within your app how the staff will be funded going forward, and if the staff salary is only required to start the project and then is not needed any longer. And just to be clear on the capital improvements, point at the bottom of the slide, we do fund capital projects. And in fact, St. Mark's Center for Community Renewal was awarded a grant for renovation of their kitchen a few years ago. And our committees will be looking at the impact that would be generated by the capital improvements. For capital improvements, you need to own the property or have a lease with at least 5 years remaining from the date of the grant agreement to be considered. Next, please. So as Ann mentioned earlier, the eligibility form will be available on April 4th and needs to be submitted by May 13th. After you send in your eligibility form, our grants team will review it, and only once it's been approved, you'll receive an email confirming that you're eligible. In that email, you'll receive a link to the online application. If you do not hear from us or receive an email within 48 hours of submitting your eligibility form, please contact grants@impact100jc.org to ensure that we actually received your eligibility submission. Don't wait. So the following screenshots are going to take you step by step through the process. Step 1 is to access the eligibility form via our eligibility page on our website and click How to Apply, which will take you to the eligibility form landing page. You're taken to this eligibility page in Submittable. And again, Submittable is an impact tailored program, and many of you used the system last year. The mechanics haven't changed, but we'll go over some of the basics today. We're committed to supporting all of you through the process, so let us know if you have any questions along the way as well. Particularly of note, please whitelist submittable. So there's a link for instructions about how to set up whitelisting and what's important about that. Whitelisting ensures that anything from submittable sent back to you will not go into your junk or spam. So that's important. Keynote, you can save your work as you go along. And if at any time you want to edit or withdraw, you can send us a request to do so at any time. The next step is to click apply, and then you come to this next screen, which automatically defaults to the sign-in screen. But you haven't set up your account yet. So you have to click on sign up that in the upper left corner where the arrow is. Then you'll choose whatever email and a password of your choosing to create a submittable account. For all returning applicants, you can use your login information from last year. And if you don't remember your password, use the forget your password feature to retrieve it. Anyone in your organization or outside your organization that's working on processing your application with you, they'll need access to your application and will need the logon details that you set up. So please retain them in a safe place for future use throughout the process. So ignore this next slide. It's standard marketing content from Submittable and click OK. So next you'll be taken through to your eligibility form to complete and submit. You can save your work and return to the form if you want to continue and work on it at a later date. After submitting your organization's eligibility form, you'll receive an acknowledgement that comes to you automatically. And it says, you can expect to receive a follow-up response from us within a week. Please, 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 again, if you do not hear from us in this time frame, reach back out and confirm that we've received your information. We will double check and we will keep you on track for a successful submission. Next, when your organization is deemed eligible, you'll receive the welcome communication. All eligible applicants will receive an email with a link to the actual application. And the letter states, based on the submission of your eligibility form, your organization is eligible to apply. So let's look deeper into funding priorities. We are looking to fund priorities, or we are looking to fund projects that meet our three funding priorities. Projects that target underserved populations, address an unmet need, and have a high impact on beneficiaries. Now let's look at one of the first questions in the actual application. Who is the underserved population? How and why are they currently underserved? Perhaps government funding doesn't include them in their policy, or perhaps an urgent, unrecognized, on-the-ground insight that you can highlight for our members. Next, let's look at the next question. What are their unmet needs, and how will your project specifically address those needs? What's the current service delivery gap that isn't and won't be filled without your project or program? Sometimes when thinking about this, it's helpful to consider what would happen without your project. Why is it absolutely necessary that you do your project at this time? And lastly, describe the impact on the beneficiary. Your project may impact more people. For example, your project might enable you to reach 50 or more schools. Or it might impact individuals, but in a very big way. For example, providing housing and wraparound services for 5 individuals, which could be truly life-changing for an individual. Use both outputs and outcomes to tell your story and make your application stand out. So let's move to the content of your application and what makes them stand out. Our application is the same as last year, but every year we make a few adjustments in response to feedback that we receive through the nonprofit surveys. So thank you so very much to all of you who filled out the nonprofit surveys. We thank you not only for taking time to complete it, but for sharing your thoughts with us, because it's so valuable for us to hear back from all of you. In the application process, be as transparent as you can with any contingencies that could be outstanding for your application, things like permits or other documents that would be necessary. We'll also, as a note, be including a preview of this application on our website in the next couple of weeks. And we know that many of you collaborate on applications, and so we hope this might be helpful. We also know how critical feedback is to your organization, and why we cannot provide tailored individual feedback to every applicant in response to a specific application or request. We do provide high-level feedback, which we gather directly from our focus area committee members, along with our notifications at each stage of the review process. We also provide organic feedback via members during the review process in other ways, particularly during the site visit, the final presentation rehearsals, and Betsy's going to talk about that a little more later. What's important to us is that we set you up for success in whatever ways we can. So this slide is a summary of the key things our members are looking at. On the first 2 points, we are looking for a well-written, clear, and concise proposal with all of the necessary attachments. Don't forget those. We welcome proposals for the same project as previous years, but check and recheck if you decide to copy and paste. Be careful to describe your organization and the program as if the reader has never heard of it before. Remember, the mix of the women on your focus area committee that would be reviewing your proposal will be different than last year, even if you're still applying to the same focus area. Secondly, if there's any issues with IT, particularly with uploading documents, by all means, email us at the grants address. But one benefit of the Submittable platform is the upload capacity is far greater. So we shouldn't see any issues this year with uploading bigger files like your financial documents. We'll also be able to message you directly through Submittable to ask you to submit any missing documents. But please do it in advance of the June 1st deadline. To be fair to other groups, please ensure all information is submitted in advance of the deadline. And this second bullet here is important. Be totally upfront and transparent about any contingencies, permits, or approvals that are pending, and when you are expecting to have approval on those. Our members will not be able to move your application forward if these outstanding items are not resolved by September 15th. So let's drill down a little more into the 5 points on the prior slide. And these are actual questions from the application. And we wanted to try to give you more insight into what our members look for in each one. The focus area you're applying into. So there's a question in the application, what focus area are you applying to and why, which asks you to share the rationale behind why you applied into that focus area. This question is in response to feedback from surveys that it always isn't easy to decide because a particular project may fall into more than one focus area group. We do get that. What's important is that what is the best fit for your project and why. We hope by adding this extra explanation, it will help our members better understand your rationale for choosing the focus area that you did. When thinking about the focus area to choose, think about the primary focus and purpose of your project. Does the project fit into a niche? And if so, maybe it's better to focus on that niche rather than applying into a much more broad category. Also, think about the other applications that will be in the focus area that you're considering. What is the focus of the proposed project and what are the outcomes that you're looking for? Finally, look at the past grant recipients. Let's give for an example about the broad groups. So arts education and environment education, you would apply into the arts group, focus group, or the environment focus group, not education. Again, you're focusing on the project and the focus of the project. So let's go on to outputs and outcomes. So most of you are familiar with outputs and outcomes. Simply put, outcomes are the so what of your organization. So what if you serve 300 ice cream cones? What change do you see in the world? Are the individuals more optimistic? Are they more likely to follow their diet next week? Bring your output to life. Be specific and be detailed as much as possible. Next, make sure you tell us how you would track and measure the impact of your project. Next. Finally, when describing the project's impact, be clear about your timing. With this grant, what impact will you create within the grant period, since you have up to 2 years to spend the money? Realistically, what accomplishments will you achieve in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months? It is okay if your program is going to come to an end. Perhaps a staff member is only being contracted for a 2-year term with a very specific job to do, or a renovation project is going to be completed in 15 months. Just be sure to explain how you'll responsibly bring the project to an end. However, if the project is going to be ongoing beyond the grant period, make sure you help our members understand the long-term impact of your program and your organization's capacity to deliver the program effectively. What does success look like? How will you be measuring and capturing that? So thank you for your time. And now I'd like to introduce Liz Mcneill. She's the FRT specialist, and she's going to go over some of the financial aspects of the application. Liz?
Hi, this is Liz Mcneill. I am the chair of the Financial Review Committee for Impact. So I'm just going to touch pretty briefly on what the financial requirements are, and you'll see this in the application. So we ask you to list the top 5 institutional donors. We want you to note the committed and projected funding amounts for the current and past 2 completed fiscal years. Financial statements, ideally independently reviewed or audited for the past 2 fiscal years. On a prior slide, we said that the $500,000 was the amount that required by the IRS required audited financial statements, but it's actually now $1 million. So chances are, a fair amount of you would have reviewed statements or just able to sign off, have an executive director or CEO sign off on the financial statements. The budget for your current fiscal year and year-to-date actual versus budgeted figures for your current fiscal year. You do not need to submit your 990s. I just want to emphasize this. We will access them through through GuideStar and get them through lots of other means of getting them. They're just so long and such a deep intense document. We don't need you to submit those. We give the opportunity to have a financial narrative. It's optional, but it does give you an opportunity to expand on or explain anything pertinent that may have happened. Particularly with COVID, there might have been something that you wanted to make sure was explained more fully. And then the project budget. So the project budget template provided in the application is fairly straightforward. I think that it's on the next slide. Oh, maybe not. There it is. There. Thank you. So this is a good example of a budget presentation. So you've got the source of the funds and the project expenses pretty specifically listed out. The committed and the pending and the total, as well as the amount of funding that'll come from Impact. And I don't know, Anne, if we want to go back, then sorry, I know I'm hopping around a little bit. Okay. Please make sure that there are no gaps in the periods covered by the financial statements. So you should show 3 complete years at a minimum, 2 completed and 1 budgeted. We know most of your fiscal years end in June and begin in July, and that's kind of why we're saying this. And if they're not audited or reviewed, a signed attestation that the financials are complete and accurate is required. And if you don't have the most audited financials, do not worry. Just provide a draft version and note in the financial narrative box at the end of the application. If you have any problems uploading these documents, please email us immediately at grants@impact100jc.org. We don't want a little technical glitch to get in the way of your uploading all of your documents. Make sure your project budget is credible and well-defined. So what we mean by that is we want to ensure that the budget total equals or exceeds the grant amount. As previously stated, you must expend the entire grant amount within 24 months. Ensure the project budget adds up correctly in both totals, subtotals, and line by line, and ensure the project narrative and budget match. So if the narrative document states that you're going to spend money on certain aspects of, executing the program, just please make sure that those items are in the budget. And also in turn, while you're working through the budget, if there are items that come up and you say, oh, wow, there's actually this expense that we need to include, please just make sure and go back and look at the narrative and make sure that they are equal. And make sure that the project budget is realistic, because that's certainly something that we all look for. If the project is dependent on other funding, please be sure to include the funds already secured in the committed column. So as we were just looking at it, there's a committed column provided in the project budget and clearly described what your plan is to secure any other funding in the narrative. It's a very clear question that asks you to do that because that's probably, it's one of the questions that arises as these are specific projects. This is the good budget, which you just went through, but we also have a bad budget example. So this would be a bad budget. So, looking from top to bottom, there's no period listed for reference. The total possible funds, it does not, what the total project expenses are only 246. So what if all the funds are collected? How would the extra money be spent? And you'll see, as you look at this in more detail, you'll be able to see some of the other examples. We try to provide this to make it really, really clear and hopefully give you as much information as possible when you're filling out the budget. So now I'm going to pass this over to, who am I passing on to? Sorry.
It's okay.
For site visit.
You're passing it over
Elizabeth, there you go. Sorry about that.
It's actually, we're both Elizabeths on the grant.
I know, I was just thinking.
So I'm Betsy McKnight. I'm the nonprofit coordinator co-chair, and I'm happy to be co-chairing it with another Elizabeth this year. So you've submitted your applications and the FACs have had a chance to look at them. And at this point, approximately 3 to 5 in each focus area will be selected for a site visit. The site visits will hopefully take place in person this year. We know in the past couple of years or 2 years, due to COVID, we've had to make them virtual. And while that worked, it is definitely our intention to make them in person this year. However, obviously, we do not control the health landscape. So, we ask you to be patient on that. And you'll have ample time warning if the FACs are thinking of going virtual. The purpose of these site visits is to really allow you to introduce your staff, let us get some faces with some names, and to bring the project to life. We want to find out more detailed information about your organization and about the project. The financial review team may take a deeper dive, if necessary, on your finances. And everyone that goes through this process of getting a site visit is eligible or will be invited to submit a wish list, which is shared with the entire Impact membership, and it gives you a chance to share your needs with the community. Next slide, please. So to make the most of this opportunity, as I said, you to tell your story and give the committee members a chance to understand your strengths, the resources and plan that you're going to use for how you're going to use the grant funds. It's important to use the time wisely. Focus on your project more than on your overall operation. If you do give a tour of your facilities, focus on those that are going to be used by the project. We don't need to see the boiler room unless we're replacing your boiler. And be prepared sort of with your elevator speech. What is the key information that you want the committee members to come away with? Because remember, they're going to be going back to the focus area committee and sort of selling your project to the rest of the committee members. So, what is it that you want them to part with? Next slide, please. Now, we've gone through the site visits and we have selected the time for the finalists. Up to 2 will be selected in each for each FAC. And in advance of the annual meeting, Finalist Liaisons will be appointed. They're really to walk you through the process. They will help you. Each finalist will be given a finalist packet. And one of the things in there is we ask you to do a one-page information sheet. And this is important because for absentee voters at the annual meeting, this is sort of a way to vote for you. So you want to make sure that you pay attention and draft it, take the drafting seriously. This Finalist Liaison really is your cheerleader. They're very helpful in this step of the process. And, we urge you to, they've been there and they've done that. And they've also heard what the other FAC members liked about your project or what, they would like to hear more about. So we urge you to pay attention to their comments and critiques because they really can be quite valuable. We're very excited that we can provide a in-person rehearsal. We use the professionals who've awarded a lot of grants and really know what they're talking about from the Community Foundation of New Jersey, and they provide critical in-time feedback and specific, very relevant recommendations. One thing I would say to this is if you get to this stage, try to get your presentation as close to as it's going to be by the time you get to the rehearsals, because that way you really get the most out of it. You get the most best critique on what you were planning on presenting. So then the night of the presentation, it's one member, one vote to determine which finalists will receive the grants. The grant recipients will be announced that evening, and the mission grants will be presented. And as we've mentioned, the amount is to be decided depending on the final numbers. But if you tune in on April 7th, you can find out more about it. Next slide, please. Okay, so you've done it. You've got the grant, but we don't just hand you the money and run. At this point, a grantee liaison is appointed, and that's a point person who works with you throughout your grant period. And particularly during COVID, we found that this was really invaluable. This point of contact, grantees in the past years found that they couldn't do what they wanted to do based on the guidelines, based on the landscape. So we're really committed to working with grantees when and if circumstances change. We try to be as flexible as possible. We understand the challenges that nonprofits currently face, and we'll work with you to implement reasonable accommodations. The main thing we ask on that is let us know early and often, be specific. Don't be afraid to come to us and say, hey, we can't hire this person. We can't find somebody, or it's costing us more. We want to move money from this point of it. Or these are just examples, but it's a partnership. So we will work with you. All right, next slide, please. So the benefits of the process. It really, even if you're not selected as a grant recipient, we've heard a lot of feedback that the process has given an in-depth, unique insight into your organization to hundreds of philanthropic-minded women. And, impact members really are ready to give their time, talent, and treasure, and it's great exposure. There's a lot of feedback that's built into the process, whether it's with the notifications and the questions and comments at the site visit or during the rehearsals for the presentations. And the members learn about your needs through wish lists, and they often do get involved. We have a lot of stories of impact members being invested in what they learned about during their FAC time and becoming involved in the organization. And we've also heard a lot that the process can really help you to hone your goals, your outcomes, and your mission, leaving in a stronger position to go to other funders if need be, and also to come back next year. Next slide, please. So this just gives you a little bit of an idea of, where the $2 million that we've awarded to 18 grantees over since 2015. We're proud to have funded all 5 focus areas in our 6 years. But the FAC category is less important than the strength of the project. So, impact members are looking to fund projects that solve problems and improve and support all aspects of life in Monmouth County. Last year, we received 61 applications, and approximately 25% of our membership volunteered to review them. And we were able to award 4 grants in the amount of $114,000 each. This slide really shows you the geographic diversity of the grants that we gave. Funding is possible. Do apply again, because here today you've taken the first step. There's a lot of project diversity, and there's a lot of wide geography covered. It's possible. Of the last 18 grantees, 9 of them applied three or more times before becoming a grantee. And if this is your first time applying, know that 4 of our grantees were awarded the project on the first try. So the process can work for everyone. Our grantees' proposals have had a broad diversity of projects focusing on addressing hunger, supporting healthcare, developing the arts, and addressing the oceans and supporting youth. And as you can see, geographically, they've come from about 11 towns throughout Monmouth County. And, we're always looking, we're trying to, get more nonprofits from the West to apply. And financially, our finalists spanned a wide range of revenues. Last year, we had finalists with revenue in the $500,000 range. We've had some in the $1 million range, and one was over $10 million. What's important to us is that the project can be executed and that organizations can manage the $100,000 effectively. There's no magic formula for organization size, location, project focus. The funding proposal focus remains. A specific project that meets the funding priorities, has an high impact, and is articulated clearly. So should you reply? I think if the prior slides have not convinced you, I have a few more things to say. You should apply because the pool of applicants changes. So who you're being compared against changes every year. The focus area committee composition changes. So who's judging you, even if the criteria is consistent, the women who are reading your application change. And as does the environment that we're living in and experiencing. I've mentioned several times how our finalists, we have a lot of repeat applicants who actually do get the funding. And members come to the table with fresh eyes and new perspectives. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel if you've had a past presentation. If the need is still there and you feel your proposed project is the best to address those needs, then by all means resubmit. Each year is a new opportunity to come back with more understanding and experience of the process. So as I've said several times here, we've had lots of applicants in our grantee pool who've come back and been successful. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Nye, who is going to introduce 2 of last year's grantees who are going to give you their perspective on the process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betsy. So I now want to welcome representatives from our 2021 grant recipients. I want to thank Jeannie and Beatrice for joining us. So Jeannie, can I have you unmute and tell us a little bit about yourself and the Parker Family Health Center?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I'm Jeannie Wagner. I'm Director of Development at Parker Family Health Center. And I just want to start off by letting you know that I was on the board at Parker, but I took over the job of Director of Development at the end of 2019. I had never written a grant in my life, and I was only going to be there for a month while we found somebody. And in the meantime, Parker hired an executive director who they'd never had before. So 2020 started with a Director of Development who didn't know how to write a grant, a brand new executive director, and COVID. And we're a health center. So it went from there. So I went back and reviewed Parker's history with impact, and in actual fact, we've applied 6 times over the course of time. And I understand that one year we were rejected for not following the rules. One year was a collaboration. The first year I was there, we did make it to the site visit. And one of the things they wanted us to cover was our biggest challenge. And the biggest challenge for me was I was afraid to ask for help. And when we reapplied last year, I realized that the people at Impact, somebody mentioned this before, they want you to succeed. And they do everything they can to help you succeed. So, I had a problem filling out the budget the first year. And instead of just asking for help, I struggled. I shouldn't have struggled. I have to say overall that the help we received, they want you to win. That's the bottom line. Everybody at Impact wants you to be the winner. So this was a wonderful experience. It actually brought our organization together. Everybody got involved in the whole process when we did the filming. It was a really exciting adventure for Parker. And when we won, it was awesome. But if we hadn't won, as you said, it really helped our organization come together as a group. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. Next, I would love to introduce Beatrice Osterheld. I hope I'm saying your last name right, Beatrice. If you can unmute, she is part of the Community Affairs and Resource Center. Is she still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh.
I'm here. Okay, so hi, how are you? So I'm going to ditto what Ginny said. We applied 5 times. So, and 2020, we had the site visit, but we didn't get it. And then 2021, we received it. I want to say that we changed, we tweaked it. I was also involved with Impact 100 at the beginning. And then I decided the year that we got it, I decided not to join because I thought maybe I was giving them bad luck, But our organization has been in existence since 1980. I have been in this position for 12 years, and I have started to give my time for 1 year. And that was it. I didn't want to get paid. I said, I'm going to try to help this organization for 1 year. And this is 12 years later. Now I get paid. But I think we do serve the underserved community. We actually have many grants. Now with COVID, we have Flourish again. We did the same thing with Sandy. We now have rental assistance. We helping people now greatly we have somebody at the courthouse in Monmouth County. So if you're going to be evicted, we work with the tenant and we work with the lawyers and the judge and the landlord. We have a very robust domestic violence, sexual assault. We have a Hispanic Women's Center. And what we applied was Roses. Roses, with COVID hit, we were approached by University of Michigan and Brown University. This is an evidence-based program for postpartum depression. We find that when COVID hit, the women were really so isolated that they were really super depressed. So we started doing it with Zoom. We had to teach them how even to get Zoom, how to do it. So it was a learning experience for us. So we decided in 2021 that was what we were going to apply for. And we received it. Saying that it was easy, I can't say that because we were nerve-wracking. When we had the site visit, you never know if you're saying the right thing. And, you have my board, you have my staff. But I have to say, it is one of the best experiences we had. It brought us together. And for the video, I can tell you, and I'm not embarrassed of saying it, that we sent the first video and they said, this is no good. So I went home, I was almost in tears crying. And then we did it again, but they do want you to win. They will coach you. And it's not only being part of winning, it's being part of the Impact 100. We have been approached by other organizations to ask how we did it. And it is putting us back in the map. You have to remember, when I started in this organization, our budget was $250,000. This was 2010. My budget now is $5 million. And I'll tell you, it has to do with working and partnering and becoming part of helping the underserved community. We serve everybody and we're learning every day. We do ESL classes. If somebody is in need, if we cannot help them, I reach out to another organization that can help them. And I think that's the biggest thing. But the biggest impact that Impact 100 has done for us is that it made us believe that we could do it. That night of the last, when we share our video and all that, we were at my house. I cooked dinner, and I first had to prepare my staff to please don't be too disappointed if we don't win, because I know they were going to be crushed. And when we won, it was such an amazing feeling. And not only of being part of something, but the way that the members of Impact 100 help us, it was amazing. And I have been in that meeting when everybody's there in person. It was a little different when it was by Zoom, but in spite of that, it was great. It was a great experience for us, and I'm glad. And if anybody want to ask me a question or call me later and ask my opinion, because we applied 5 times, but the fourth time we were applying almost the same thing. And then I decided, let's do something different. Let's do something that had to do with COVID. And that's when we won. So sometimes what you think that you should be applying for, really it's a different. And we are helping. Right now we're virtual with the Roses program, but we are hoping that by the summer we can be in person and do it in person. We do it in English and we do it in Spanish. And it's just making this woman feel like somebody cares, and how they become friends with each other and they're less isolated. I think I talk more than I have to, but
thank you so much for that, Beatrice. That was great.
I wrote something and I said something totally different.
That's okay. And just so you know, we are hopeful that our annual meeting this year goes back to in person. The past 2 years because of COVID. So fingers crossed, we'll see what the COVID landscape is in November, but we are hopeful that we'll be back in person so that energy can be felt by all of our members and for all the nonprofits that present that evening. Well, thank you so much, ladies. I am going to put this one last slide up. These are important dates for this year's application. These windows we just want to make you aware of. We have received feedback that summer is really challenging for some organizations. So as you start to apply, just kind of keep these in the back of your mind if you continue to advance through the process. FAC meetings where semifinalists and site visits are determined will take place the last 2 weeks of July, and you will be contacted immediately after those decisions are made and all those meetings have taken place. Site visits will happen from the beginning of August, probably by the time you schedule it, it won't be that first week, but beginning of August to the end of September. And then our final FAC meetings where they select the finalists will take place October 1st to the 15th. We do a finalist reveal for our members on October 20th, and that's why October 21st we will contact all the finalists. And of course, because we'll know how many finalists we have, mission awards will be clearly defined that evening as well. At this time, I want to go back to the chat and open up some of the questions we received throughout the presentation. I want to thank everyone for their time. I think we said about an hour and a half, so we're doing well. So we can take as many questions as you want. After this presentation, please email us any further questions and we will address them individually or on April 7th. So let's go. Ro, do you have any immediate ones that you want to answer from the chat?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. I've just been keeping track. So some of them have been answered within the chat. And just a reminder that everybody should be able to save the chat before you jump off. So if you do want to keep a record of it, I believe you can do that your end. I think that's right. Anyway, just to go then to the questions that have not been answered in the chat. We had a question from Laurie Roth. So Betsy or Elizabeth, if one of you want to take this, do municipalities count as nonprofit organizations for the purpose of the grant?
So it's the 501c3 status. So if your municipality has a foundation or something that has the 501c3 status, then yes, they can apply. I think also there was a question regarding libraries, and it's a similar thing. It's the 501c3 status that determines eligibility in that regard.
Great. Thank you, Betsy. Hope that answers your question, Laurie. A good question from Cindy Fagan. Thank you for this because it is an important question. Can you be a collaborator, i.e. not a lead organization for more than one proposal?
You cannot. You only get one bite at the apple for getting money that you control. However, if you are a partner meaning that, well, another another example of this would be for a vendor, and I'm just going to keep it very general. You are the ice cream provider that everyone in Monmouth County uses for their nonprofit events. And you just happen to be, the one that people buy from. In that case, you're just sort of being paid as a vendor, and you're not actually controlling how much is spent, how much ice cream you buy from you. So in that case, you wanted to set up a charitable foundation to give out ice cream on the side. You and also be, selling ice cream to the other nonprofits in Monmouth County. So it's the one bite of the apple for controlling the money from Impact 100. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Betsy. From Nicole Nappy, and I don't think Liz, you answered this yet. Are there any limits of funding for staffing? In particular, she mentions teaching salaries. I think you said that there's no cap, but just to clarify on this particular point about staffing costs.
Right. No, there's no limitations.
Yeah, there's no limitations. And basically that, people have asked, our grant is primarily about funding staff. Sometimes we've had that be a large part of the proposal, and that's fine as long as you show the impact of how would hiring more teachers or raising the teacher salaries or whatever, how will that impact the recipients of, how would that the people who the grant is intended for.
And then from Janice Alderman, great question, thank you. If starting a program and you need to hire staff, do they have to be hired by the 15th of September? Because we did say be transparent about contingencies. So that's a great question, Janice. Thank you. Could get to Betsy or Elizabeth.
I can take that one. Sure. No, we can be flexible on that. They do not have to be hired by that date. The idea is, you get the money from us, and then if you start your process of looking for it, and you don't find a good candidate, we're certainly not going to tell you to settle for somebody just because you have this funding. This is a good example of we would be flexible with you, and and help you either wait it out or whatever needs to be done to get the appropriate staff person for the position. Any other questions?
Thanks, Betsy. Yes, Amy just came in. Thank you, Amy. It says, and I'll come back to Alexis, which came in as well. Is there an expectation or preference that the projects last 2 years, or is it acceptable to have a project budget for 1 year?
Totally acceptable.
Yeah. No, I was just sorry. Go ahead, Elizabeth. Go ahead, Betsy. No, I was going to say it is acceptable, absolutely, as long as it's spent within 24 months.
Yeah, and we've had projects do both.
Yep.
And so there's absolutely no preference, so don't try to stretch it to 2 years. If it makes sense and you can accomplish it in a year, then absolutely.
Great. And another question from Alexis. Thank you. I understand capital improvement guidelines, but do you fund capital campaigns if it aligns with your focus areas and if 100K can have a transformative impact? No one wants to answer that one.
Well, I can take a stab at it. It's kind of a squishy question. So because capital campaigns are funding capital expenses, I guess you could, apply for the grant funding for capital expenses as part of your capital campaign, right? I think it's sort of like carpal for the horse. I think that the grant application would be toward your capital expenses. How you internally want to position that within your capital campaign, I think that would be a question for your organization rather than for us.
And also just to add to that, I did want to just say, I think with campaigns, it also depends on where you are in your campaign. Some capital campaigns can last a few years. So it'd be really important to explain to our members where you are in that process. Are you in the quiet phase? Are you towards the end? You know, at what point is the actual implementation of the project going to come about because you've met your campaign goals? So timing, I think, would be an interesting one with that. We can also take this offline because that could be, it's quite nuanced, that question. It's a great question, but I think it will depend on the details of the capital campaign. So I just thought I'd add that. We've had that come up before. So it's quite important for us to understand the intricacies of it before we say yay or nay to you with any definitive answer, I think. Nicole Nappy, thank you for another question. Can staff be new hires, or is there a preference for already hired staff?
Staff can absolutely be new hires, or if you need to, you know, we've had people take existing staff and move them to another position, and then they needed to rehire for that, and they use their funding. Again, it's all about the project and what makes the most sense for the organization to make the project the most successful.
And you'll want to make sure within your application that if you're bringing in a new hire, that you've had an explanation. So you're clarifying exactly how you're going to go after the new hire and when you expect them to start, so that the committees, when they're reviewing it, have some understanding about how this person's going to come into the role to be able to affect change.
And Natalie, I can answer your question for the top 5 institutional funders. It's the top 5 funders for the organization, whoever that may be. Sometimes it's an individual.
And I think we just say in the application, you can put anonymous, and we'll sort of take that.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can the beneficiaries of our project extend beyond Monmouth County? And that's from Carol. Thank you, Carol. Great question.
Generally speaking, the beneficiaries of the project should be Monmouth County. So I guess it depends on what you're talking about, a project that might have ancillary benefits to members of beyond Monmouth County. I mean, there has been examples of, let's say that we funded an organization that gave out food, and they don't ask every person who comes in where they're from. And we're certainly not going to impose that for you if you wanted to get the benefits. If you're planning on giving it outside of Monmouth County, then no. But if the benefit is sort of like ancillary, or if it's a, you know, it happens to also help people that are beyond Monmouth County, then it would be acceptable. So if you know, if you have further questions on that, don't hesitate to reach out to us and Grants, or come back to the, you know, we can take a look at it on the April 7th one as well. Or if you're still on the line and you want to clarify the question, you can do that as well.
I think I got them all. If anybody wants to raise their hand or just unmute to ask a question, by all means do. Just in case I missed anything in the chat. Otherwise, I think we took all the questions that were in there. Gallery mode is tricky because there are quite a few of you still. So you can unmute and just say, I've got a question, if anybody has anything that we missed or anything you need clarified.
May I ask a question?
Go for it.
Okay, hi, I'm new to this project process. We're looking to build permanent supportive housing, and we are literally at the very beginning of this stage. And I'm wondering if you allow this money to be used to buy property to get us started. Like literally to buy the land, and then I believe the government will pay for the building. Or is that too specific a question?
It's just a new question. So we're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, again, timing and whether or not you're going to be able to meet the timing of and the requirements of the grant within the time. So a lot of it will be contingencies that would probably worry our members if by September 15th you didn't have clarity on some of those building permits. So anything building becomes a little tenuous to see you through to actually receiving the money. If there are outstanding permits, anything like that that's waiting approval, it could be tricky. Again, don't want to totally rule it out. Betsy, chime in, Elizabeth, chime in if you disagree, but I think it's worth a conversation. But just to put it out there that this sounds like a bit more of a long-term implementation, and so it may be that in future years you might be better placed in terms of timing to apply once you've got.
Okay, but you did say that you would pay for staff. So as I said, we're in the beginning, and we certainly have to hire new staff to make, to apply for all the grants and see this building to fruition. So we could apply for the staffers. But when does the money come through?
So if you applied, sorry.
I think I didn't understand that part. So I understand, like, maybe you make your decisions in November. So when like could we bring somebody new on staff? Like, when would the money come through?
So we make it in November, and then you sign a grant agreement, kind of outline how money is going to be allocated and the reports that you're going to give and that kind of thing. So you could get the money as early as, I think we've given it out as early as December. January is often. Let's correct me if I'm wrong here.
December. Okay. And that's then when we could start actually paying somebody's salary. All right. Or could you hire them earlier and then back, we can just put the money in the budget? Are you allowed to do that?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If I brought somebody on in September, can we use the money you give us to put back in our budget, to go back and pay the salary?
Yeah, you don't have to hire somebody just after the start of the grant agreement. I guess it would just be that you've got the staffing expense within the budget to implement the project. And grant agreement, the completion of the grant period is no more than 2 years from the grant agreement date. So if you wanted, the sooner we get that grant agreement and sort of set up and up and running, we can pay out the first installment as soon as beginning of January, I would say.
I understand. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.
Joining us. And I'll kick it back to you unless anybody else got any more questions.
I was just going to give everyone another 10 seconds. Any other questions? I just want to encourage everyone to, did I hear?
Yeah, will the slides be accessible on the website? Yes, sorry, I didn't make that clear at all. The recording and the full deck will be on our website under our, it's under our how to apply page. So yes, and there are FAQs on there as well, which hopefully give some color to any questions that you may have and grants at impact100jc.org for anything we haven't covered, anything you need clarified, feel free to email us.
We have one more question from Nicole. Nicole, go ahead.
Thank you, everybody. Real quick, it always seems that the last hour of the spreadsheet, I always have questions. Is there a sample that could be provided online that has either a tooltip rollover that you could roll over and then get a definition of what each column or each section means, so it's not a scramble to try to figure out the last minute what you are requiring for that section of the budget for that document?
We don't have something specific like that. We can look into making something like that. We will post the project budget and we'll have these slides, so it'll have the good and bad if you want to reference that and make sure that you look at those. But I will take that suggestion and talk to Liz. Maybe next year we can get something like that.
Yeah, I hate being at the last minute and going, okay, it could mean this, but it could mean that.
Yeah, I do recommend taking a really close look at those good and bad budgets, because I think most questions should be answered. Do you know what I mean? By looking at how we've got the little pop-up comments on each thing, but also just email your question to the grants email address and one of us will answer it. Just, don't bother Googling, just send us an email, we'll answer it.
If we get to the point with the grant, with the emails where it becomes onerous, we will pick up the phone and call. I give out my phone number when it comes to that. So don't be frustrated. It's going to be like a constant, like we will get on the phone with you. It's just,
it never fails. It'll be like 3:00 and then on a Saturday afternoon go, I don't know what this means.
But again, don't wait till the final hour to submit. We have that every year, and we,
Yep.
I don't know if we specifically said that. I mean, the tech is pretty good this year, was last year, but the deadline is the deadline. So don't leave it to the end. I know everybody does, it's human nature, but it can help you a lot better the sooner you ask.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions from anyone? I did want to I know there was a great deal of information that was covered today, including the additional finalists, the DI information, the mission grants. So I do want to encourage everyone to sort of, if you want to digest this information and join us on the 7th for the Q&A deeper dive. We're going to have 2 other panelists who are going to share their insights. And it's a perfect time also to address any questions or issues you have with the eligibility quiz, because that goes live on the 1st. And this is the 7th. But again, if you have questions on the eligibility, you don't have to wait until then. You can email us.
Ro, there was this question earlier, and I don't remember if we answered it, about how many applicants we had last year.
Oh, yeah. 61. It was 61 last year. And that was down a tad, we think, because of COVID. That's the kind of the response that we were getting. A lot of organizations this year were, and maybe even last, were kind of on survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the number.
And also don't forget that we are going to be announcing our grant funding for 2022 on April 1st. So very exciting, and that will give you a little clarity. So by all means, if you've got questions, come back on April 7th, and we look forward to seeing many of you then. So look out for the news.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. We look forward to reading your grant applications. Please reach out with any questions. And mark April 7th if you have questions, but definitely April 4th to submit your eligibility on our website. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.